Hello friends, today we are going to cover attribute routing. I hope you watched my previous two videos related to the routing. Okay, so this is one of the approach of routing. So let us continue. So let us see what is an attribute routing first. Okay, in attribute routing, we actually define our URL pattern in the form of attribute on our controller or on our action method. Okay, so we are going to see both the approaches, how to apply the routing on controller and on action method. Okay, so basically attributes are nothing but a classes, okay, that can be predefined, or you can create your own attribute classes also. Here for attribute routing, whichever classes we are going to use are ready-made classes given by the MVC, so we have to just apply that attribute classes on our controller or on action method. Okay, now before taking attribute routing in an effect, we have to enable it. Okay, it do not uh, it do not works automatically. It is totally a responsibility of a programmer to enable the attribute routing, and for that we have to give call to map MVC attribute routes method. Okay, and this will be in our root config class register root method. So you have to remember this part, otherwise attribute routing will not work. Now let us see how to define an attribute routing. Attribute routing is defined at an action level or at a controller level. In both the way you can define the routing. We will see this concept practically. First of all, we will concentrate on how to define a attribute routing on action level. Now to define a routing, attribute routing and action level, you have to define the root on an action, okay, and in the declarative form in the square bracket. Now for that, a root attribute is used. Attribute name is what? Root. And for that root attribute, you have to specify a string, and you can say that string is your URL pattern, or you can also call it as root template, or you can also call it pattern matching rule, whichever you can whichever you want to call it. Okay, whichever convenient to you. So I think URL pattern will be easy for us, right? Because we can easily compare it with traditional routing, because in traditional routing also we define a URL pattern and request handler, right? So inside the root attribute you have to pass a string, and that string is nothing but our URL pattern. And your MVC work in exactly the same way as in case of traditional routing. Okay, if your URL pattern matches, that corresponding request handler or action method get executed. Now let us see this part practically before switching to root values and root parameter. So I am switching to code window. I have already created one application, attribute routing. Sorry, let me open a solution explorer first. So in a solution I have created account controller. Okay, and in that account controller I have added some method also. So login, register, change password and show. These few methods are there, and as you can see here, login, register and change password methods are written in the view. Quite simple views. I just specify the tags only and just displaying the heading, that is login, and in the register view I just displayed the register, and in this view I just displayed the change password. Okay, simple. We are not adding any complexity here, we are just focusing on attribute routing. Okay, now suppose you want to execute this login method, okay, or you want to give request to this login method. How will you give it? You will say account slash login, right? Let me write it here. How will you call this method? Account slash login, right? Now suppose I want to execute this method, okay, whenever user says admin/sign. Okay, so what is my URL pattern? Okay, this is what? This is our request handler, right? This is what? This is request handler. Let me write it here. This is my request handler. And what is my URL pattern? My URL pattern is admin/sign-in. Okay, so this is my URL pattern. Let me write it here. This is my URL pattern. Okay. In case of traditional routing, we used to write all these things in our root config.cs file, right? Which is present in app_start folder. But in case of attribute routing, and since we are focusing on action level attribute routing, you have to write the URL pattern above your action method. And for that, which attribute is used? Attribute name is itself root. Now inside that round bracket or as a parameter, you will pass a URL pattern. Now what is our URL pattern? Our URL pattern is admin/sign-in. So I'll copy this. It should be in the form of string. I hope you understand this, and quite easy, right? Suppose you simply want to call it as sign-in, definitely you can say sign-in. It is not necessary to specify admin/sign-in always. You can just say sign-in also. I'm just showing you an example. Now, the most important thing that we have to do here is to enable our routing. And for that, I have to go to rootconfig.cs file. And here, I have to enable the attribute routing, and for that the method is roots.mapMVC attribute routes. Okay, so what it does, it will enable attribute routing. Remember this thing, this line is very important. Now again, call to this method, or the order of call to this method is very important. Suppose you want attribute routing to be considered first, and then after the traditional routing to be considered by your routing engine. In that case, you will give call to you will give call to this method before defining the other routes. But if you want to give a preference to the routes defined in your root config.cs file, in that case you can specify this call after these routes. Okay, but generally attribute routing focuses on specific routes. Okay, attribute routing focuses on specific routes, and traditional routing focuses on general route. That's why it is generally preferred to give a call to, or to enable the attribute routing before specifying any route. So attribute routing will give a high preference, and traditional routing or convention based routing will give a low preference. Okay, now let us switch here. So we enabled it also, so let us try to execute it. Okay, showing an error because in our root config file there is one default route, and that route is execute home controller's index method, but in our application there is no home controller and no index method. So let us give call to our defined route, that is admin/sign-in, right? So let us see whether it is working or not. Yes, it is working fine, right? I hope you understand this concept. Let us create one more route. Now for register method, I want to define the route as admin/signup. Okay, admin/signup. So I have to just write it here, root, and in the square bracket I have to define my URL pattern, right? suppose for change password also, root admin slash say reset password. Okay, or suppose I want to place one hyphen sign here, it also applicable or valid. Okay, so let us try to execute these roots. Now here suppose you want to execute, suppose nothing is specified here, in that case suppose you want to display your login page, in that case you can define that root in a root config.cs file. So account, sorry, not account, admin slash sign up. Okay, should show me the register page, right? We have just given a heading, and for change password we specify the root as admin slash reset dash password. Okay, it is also working fine. I hope you understand this concept, how to define the root at action level. Now whenever we want to define a root at controller level, okay, so let us see what to do for it. I'm switching to PowerPoint presentation. We'll see this part later, related to root values and root parameter. So for controller level attribute routing, okay, you will define the common things at controller level. Okay, means suppose here if you observe, every time we are saying admin slash admin slash admin slash. Okay, this is common part. Instead of writing it again and again, if I can mention it for the controller, then it will be very easy for me. Okay, so that things can be defined with the help of controller level attribute routing. Okay, now what it does, it will avoid writing the same value for multiple root. Okay, how we are writing in our example, we are writing admin 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 again and again and again. Okay, so if your values are same, then in that case you can take a help of controller level values attribute routing. So for controller level attribute routing, we have to use root prefix attribute. Okay, and as the name suggests, it will hold the prefix value. Means, as you can see here, the prefix of all our root is what? Admin. Okay, so instead of writing it again and again, what will I do? I'll define it as a part of controller level routing, controller level attribute routing, and this admin prefix will be decorated by root prefix attribute. So let us apply it. So let me delete it first. Slash is also not required now. Now on the controller, I'll say root prefix, and what is our prefix? Admin. Now let us try to execute all the three methods in the same way, that is admin slash sign in, admin slash sign up, admin slash reset password. Okay, just you have to write this thing not frequently. The common things can be appeared as a part of root prefix attribute. So that is the only use of controller level attribute routing. So let us try to execute admin slash sign in. So working? Yes. Now admin slash sign up. It is also working. Then the next one is reset password. Okay, so this is also working fine, right? Now let us switch to PPT. I hope you understand the controller level attribute routing. It is just used to specify the common things of your action level attribute routing using root prefix attribute. Okay, now let me tell you about a few remaining points of action level attribute routing. So in action level attribute routing, if your action method is accepting any parameter, okay, we generally define that parameter also, okay, and that parameter that which is defined in your root or routing is called as root value or root parameter, and that can be added in your URL pattern. Okay, now even you can assign the default value to that root parameter also. Okay, we'll see this how to apply it. Now let us see it. First of all, say here, instead of ID I'll say SID, and now we will name this, or we will define the attribute routing for this. So I want to call this method as display, then after slash, and since SID can take any value, it will appear in a placeholder, that is in appear as a placeholder and appear in curly braces. So the value which suppose if your variable, or while defining your URL pattern, if some part is accepting any value, you have to define it in the form of placeholder, and all the placeholders appears in a curly bracket. Now here my argument name is SID, so the same name I have to use here, and since SID take any values, I define it as a placeholder. Okay, now how will you call this method? Our root prefix is what? Admin. Okay, and then after root is display, and after slash you have to specify the value. So whatever you define here after slash, okay, actually this is not your static URL, right? All the URLs we have defined here, all these are what? Static, because it is not accepting any argument. Login is static URL, register is static URL, change password is static URL, but this URL is not static because it is accepting an argument. Before MVC, or in ASP.NET Web Form, we used to call this as a query string, or whatever value you are going to pass to your action method, that might be in the form of query string, okay, or as a form, or in the form of form collection. Okay, so here in case of query string, we have to use a question mark. Means I'll just show you call to this URL how it will be. Something like this: admin slash display, then you will say question mark, then SID, and is equal to some value, right? Now here, whenever we introduce a question mark, okay, after that we specify the parameter name also, right? Then it becomes a query string. But here, now we are going to call it as admin slash display slash 45. We are no longer mentioning the name of our parameter. So in that case, this 45 will be considered, or is called as root value or root parameter. Here it is query string, and here it is what? It is called as root value. Let me specify it. Root value, ROUT, yeah? Root value or root parameter. Remember this thing, whenever you specify the value of your action method, argument of your action method without query string, that is without specifying the parameter name and question mark sign, in that case your parameter will be called as root value or root parameter. Now let us try to execute this. Now admin slash display, and then after I'll enter some value. So it is working fine. Okay, you can see the output here. My method is returning content result. That's why you can see the output of this type. Now let us continue. Now, like a constraint in traditional routing, suppose I want to assign the constraint to this part also. Means if somebody enters the value of SID, if somebody enters the value of SID as string, then integer, or float, then integer, or other than integer, definitely the exception will raise and it will terminate my program abnormally. So to avoid this, okay, we can restrict this to our at the level of routing only. So if somebody enters the value of SID other than integer, it should display an error. Okay, means it should display a not found error. So it should handle the error at the stage of routing. So like a traditional routing, we can define a constraint to attribute routing also. So let us see that part. I already covered controller level attribute routing. So let us see the constraint for attribute routing, and that constraints are generally called as inline constraint. Okay, so when we put a constraint in our root template, now what is root template? Root template means this part. Root template means what? This part, or you can also call it as URL pattern. So whenever you put a constraint in a root template, it is called as inline constraint. Now, as you can see in this table, there are various constraints available for us, and few of them are included in this presentation. Okay, for example, if constraint is bool, n is your root parameter. It can be any variable, okay, or it can be any argument name that you have specified as a argument of your action method. Okay, for example, here n is taken. According to your action method parameter, you can change this value. Now what it means, your action method will accept argument of type boolean, that is true and false. If the value of argument is other than true and false, your routing engine will show you a not found error. Okay, similarly, like a bool, there are other data type also that I have not listed here. Means you can specify int, you can specify long, you can specify date time, etc, etc. Okay, now one more is there, mean length. This mean length is applicable to a string type of data. So here it will take at least 2 length string. Okay, at least 2 length string, not below that. At the most it can take any length of string. When we specify max length, it means at the most it will accept a string of length 2, and minimum of any length means 1, 0, etc. Now whenever we specify the length attribute, it also exactly works like a mean length and max length. When we use length, it will and for length, if 2 is specified here, what it means, it will exactly take a 2 character string. And when we specify the range for length, okay, when we specify the range for length, here it is 2, 4, means it will accept any string value of length 2, 3 or 4. Now mean and mean length is different. Mean is now applicable to your numeric type of value. Mean length, max length, length are applicable to your string type of data. Mean is applicable to your integer type of value, integer 64 value. So it will accept any value that is greater than or equal to 1. This is 1, this is not L, this is 1. It is font, because of this type of font, it is showing like a vertical bar. So let us see rest of the constraint. Max is also there. Suppose max 3 is defined. Now it will accept any value which is less than or equal to 3. Now you can specify the range also. Suppose you want to accept the value within this range, means say 1 to 3. So it will accept the value 1, 2 or 3. Other than values will be discarded and not found error will be shown. Now if alpha is specified, In case of alpha, it will only accept the string, it will not accept the numeric value. Suppose if nothing is satisfying your requirement, then definitely regex will satisfy it. Now regex exactly work like a traditional routing constraint where you have to specify the regular expression. So here you have to write a regular expression in a round bracket. So let us see this practically also. So we have already defined one method, say show, and we are naming it as a display. Now here say suppose I assign a constraint int. Now what it means? It will accept an integer type of value only. If I enter a value other than integer, it should display me not found error message. Okay, let us try to execute. Okay, so admin slash display. Now since we have defined the root parameter, let me enter a value. So it is working fine, right? Because I specified an integer value. Say now I enter string type of data. So it is showing me 404, that is not found. So is it working fine? Yes. If I do not give a constraint, if I do not give a constraint, at that time, if I entered or if I specified a string value or other than integer value, let us see what will happen. So admin slash display slash I will enter the wrong value. I will enter string type of value. See, it is raising an exception, right? Means it executes the action method. But when we put a constraint, at that time action method do not execute, routing engine handle it, right? So thus constraints are important. Now say now we will assign a range. So for that range is there, and let me specify the value from 1 to 100. Okay, now how it will work? So it will accept only a value of SID from 1 to 100. Okay, other than values will be considered as an error, and you will display a 404 page. Admin slash display slash say 50. Okay, it is working fine, right? Now say 500. It is showing you an error, that is 404 not found. Because we specified our range from 1 to 100. So let us see how to put a regular expression here. Say regex inside the round bracket. You have to specify the regular expression. So we want to accept a digit only. Here I have to escape this. So double slash and say I want to accept exactly a 3-digit number. Okay, what is the meaning of this regular expression? Slash this stands for number, and how many numbers? Exactly 3-digit number. Okay, so let us try to execute it. So admin slash display slash 200. So it is exactly 3-digit number. It should display me output. Yes, working fine. Now I add one extra digit. Okay, still it is working. Okay. So it may get executed because in our application there is one general root. Okay, and it is satisfying this condition. That's why it get executed. Okay. Actually, Why it is not working, let me tell you. See, let us run our application again. So what we specified, /d and 3, and in regular expression what is the meaning of it? Means any number should appear how many times? Exactly 3 times. So admin /display. So for 200 it should work fine, and it is working. For 2000 also it is working. Okay, and if I enter 20, then it is showing a 404 not found error. Okay, so I think here it is accepting the value below 3 digit or equal to 3 digit. Okay, you can specify the complicated regular expression here also. Okay, so this is all about constraint in attribute routing. Whatever constraint I have listed here, you can try it also. Okay, bool, mean length, max length, mean, then max, range, alpha and regex. Please try it yourself.